Notre Dame's Audric Estime scores touchdowns 55 minutes apart. In between that was a rock fight, John Brice. This is Irish Illustrated Overtime. I'm Tim O'Malley with John Brice of FootballScoop.com. And Notre Dame literally snatched victory from the jaws of defeat 1 week after its greatest gut punch in, at least 2 decades. This might be an all-timer for the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, this was unbelievable resiliency from Notre Dame, especially when the Irish not only didn't play their best game, but obviously didn't have a number of their best players, and looked a number of times in that final fourth quarter that Notre Dame was done for. Credit to Sam Hartman. His touchdown streak of consecutive games with a pass is broken, but his resiliency, along with that of his Irish teammates, absolutely front and center. And Notre Dame gets a huge win, a pivotal win that keeps everything in front of the Irish. It keeps the Irish in front of their own dreams and goals. And so ugly, but they found a way to win. That's ultimately all that matters.
Yes, it is. And speaking of which, the drive that Sam Hartman mounted for Notre Dame, if you think about this, he's missing 3 of his top 6 receivers, or we could just say 4 of his 7 varsity receivers did not play in this game. His wide receivers, although there were 4 good plays made, especially Rico Flores on the final drive, the 3 wide receivers that played at varsity, 14 targets, 4 catches, 56 yards, 2 drops, and a penalty against them as well on the last drive. Sam Hartman pulled it out without a lot of help on the perimeter. And before we get too much into where he got his help, I think his toughness and calmness on that drive really shone through.
Yeah, I mean, your 6-year quarterback who's played 55 games now or whatever it is, 54 games, something like that. Every one of those games helped compose the person that delivered Notre Dame's victory tonight. They needed every bit of that. They needed his calm. And I do give he and Marcus Freeman credit. They talked about the fact that they learned from last week. And yeah, last week it was a 4th and 1 run that he was ruled somewhat controversially short on. Tonight it was a 4th and 16 run. Absolutely no doubt. He left no doubt. He went into the heart of 4 different Duke defenders and plunged just inside the 30-yard line to set up what moments later would become Audric Estime's game-winning touchdown. This is look, that's the type of quarterback play that Notre Dame has not had enough of in recent years, and that's the type of quarterback play, once again, that keeps you with all of your goals in front of you. Not pretty, but it keeps you with all of your goals in front of you on a day that, look, Georgia trailed almost the entire game at Auburn, an Auburn team that I want to point out last week gave up 14 tackles for loss and 7 sacks in a single game and took number 1 back-to-back national champion Georgia down to the wire.
You said it wasn't pretty. Let's go back to the beginning where it did seem like it was going to be pretty. Notre Dame's first drive, 8 plays, 82 yards for an Estime score. They looked like the more physical team, but even then, it was a extremely gutsy fake punt call. 34-yard direct snap to Jeremiah Love, who does not normally line up in that position. They caught Duke, 34-yard gain, sets up the touchdown. It looked like one of those leads you can write where everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, and Duke got punched in the mouth, but Duke punched back after that. And credit the defense for holding Duke out of the end zone and really keeping Duke down. But I cannot express enough how well Duke played, because Notre Dame's a better football team with better players. Duke came today, and they were right there the entire time.
Yeah, Duke obviously fed off of its energy. I think Duke fed off of what had to be some inevitable doubt that crept into the minds of the Irish as this game tightened up, as Notre Dame had to settle for a couple of field goal attempts. Once again, when red zone touchdowns would have made all the difference in the world. And again, it's so similar, different qualities of opponent, but so similar last week, Tim, to what Notre Dame did when it let Ohio State linger in that contest very early on. This one, Notre Dame allowed Duke to linger that much longer, and then Duke seized all the second half momentum. As you noted, 55 minutes between touchdowns for Audric Estime. It was close to 3 hours of actual time off of the hour clock in terms of span between Notre Dame touchdowns. So a lot of unfortunate that Notre Dame will go back and immediately be able to learn from in this game. But fortunate in the win, and then obviously a Herculean effort from Howard Cross and most of the rest of that defense.
Yeah, the defense was outstanding. There were 6 3-and-outs, if you include a 2-play with an interception furnished by Notre Dame's defense. There was another empty possession where it was about 5 snaps for 20 yards. That's 7 possessions where Duke didn't get anything. They also suffered from some miscues on missed field goals It was like watching an old 1970s field goal kicking competition here, I think, in college where the walk-ons come in. You want to see who's going to make one. It was surprising to see that today with Schrader missing one, Duke missing a couple. Field goals and missed field goals and penalties. That is how you keep a team that you could have gotten away from. I'm not saying Notre Dame by no means dominated this game, but Notre Dame could have gotten away from Duke at least 17-0.
Yeah.
At the end of the half, maybe 20-0 if you're hitting your other field goal. And when you let a team like that stick around, I mean, 10-0 was a win for Duke.
It was absolutely a win for Duke, even and it should have been 10-3 from a Duke perspective, minimum going into the half, and then you're getting the ball. And so that once again, we didn't see Marcus Freeman as aggressive right before the half as what we had seen earlier in the season with his offense. And I think, again, Duke, despite missing the field goal, seized on that and had momentum. And interesting to note, to your point about the defense, and you do a great job of charting unofficial wins for the defense or whatever. 12 possessions for Duke tonight, 10 of the 12 empty-handed. That's a lot of winning football from Notre Dame's defensive unit.
And I think it started off because Maris Leofau was all over the field today after a game where he was not officially registered with a tackle against Ohio State, and we found out he didn't practice all week because he had a stinger. We lamented that because, Jack Kaiser could have played in that position. But Maris Leofau today was the ideal spy for Riley Leonard, especially in the first three quarters. I thought he was the noticeable guy on the field, making life very difficult for the dual threat from Duke. Howard Cross all night long. I don't want to let this get lost. 13 tackles. I have 8 of them as run stuffs, including his sack. So 7 run stuffs in that sack. Maris Leofau, 6 tackles, 4 of them run stuffs. 2 other third down wins where he just chased down Riley Leonard and a pass defense. And Riley Mills, who I did not notice, and this is why I'm glad I tracked these things during the game. Riley Mills had 4 second-half run stuffs, including 2 behind the line of scrimmage. I think that gets lost every once in a while because sometimes a player will make a play like that, and then the opponent will gain 15 yards on the next play, so you think it didn't even happen. But that's guys coming to play, winning the intervals, Marcus Freeman says, because the more of those you put together, the better off you'll be defensively. And holding Duke down the way they did, it's better than a 14-point offense. Duke's offense is better than a 14-point offense, and I thought the Irish played great defensively today. Yeah,
and again, building on some of your fantastic stats there, Tim, I would point out that Notre Dame had 6 TFLs today, and that's not a huge number on the surface, but when you look at a quarterback like Riley Leonard, who is so elusive, that can do so much with his arm and his legs, that makes TFLs in general, not just on him, makes TFLs in general much tougher. Now, Notre Dame could have had 3 or 4 more TFLs had it wrapped up a little bit better in the second half and maybe change some of those momentum shifting plays that Duke seemed to feast off of. But again, 10 of 12 drives, Duke comes up empty. Notre Dame with 6 TFLs. Howard Cross with the Herculean effort. Riley Mills, to your point, 7 tackles. That's among the singular best performances of Riley Mills' career. And they needed every single one of those tackles.
Yeah, and in the second half, Duke did start making a little headway running the football, especially with, as you pointed out, Moore, Calhoun, and Riley Leonard, when they were getting hit, they were gaining yards after contact. And Leonard really started churning out some yards there. And I think that had a little bit of an effect on Notre Dame because you would see the boundary side break down. Riley Leonard was able to break away for 2 long runs. He just got into a little bit better groove. In the first half, there was nothing for Duke running that football. And it almost looked like they had decided we are not going to try to run the football on Notre Dame, but they really settled in, and I think that's how they kind of carved their way back into the game in the second half.
And Javante Jean-Baptiste, not a huge stat line, but he comes up with one of the quarterback hurries. And here again, we've talked about this a bunch, but I'm going to continue to harp on it. He's come so far in setting the edge and playing with discipline and letting his natural skill set show. And look, just to be honest, Notre Dame is not getting that same type of edge production or discipline from the other side, and I think that's a key thing. We saw Jordan Botelho break down a couple of times tonight in edge contain. I thought that hurt Notre Dame tremendously. Notre Dame needs to get somebody on that defensive line opposite JJB to step up and be a bit more consistent and a bit more reliable at that opposite end position, and certainly a bit more disciplined in setting the edge.
And Notre Dame's running backs, it was basically the estimate show. But Jeremiah Love came in a bit. We mentioned that with the 34-yard fake punt. I have them down for 11 run stuffs against them, and they combined for about 26 carries. Duke was holding Duke inside, especially. I thought Duke won the day inside with their defensive tackles. Of course, Jamie and Franklin had something to prove today to Notre Dame fans and to Notre Dame and his former teammates. Inside the guard combination and with Zeke Correll, they had a tough time handling Duke's interior defensive tackles.
Yeah, and I think it's time now to be officially concerned about Notre Dame's propensity for penalties right now. Look, this team, when you look at what Notre Dame went through a year ago and had a first-time head coach, really how disciplined they played on the field, how little they were penalized most of the time. I think they averaged about 5 penalties per game in Marcus Freeman's debut campaign. We're seeing them penalized way too much this season. I believe that's now the third game out of 6 that Notre Dame has been penalized double-digit times. That's not winning football. They've obviously won 2 of those 3 games in spite of that, or maybe all 3 because last week they weren't badly penalized. But again, you can't have 10, 10, and 12 penalty performances, especially on the road against a team that is just absolutely feeding off of your mistakes.
Yeah, I have four false starts and a delay of game offensively, plus the Rocco Spindler hold, which is going to happen. You're going to get called for holding at times, but it's the 4 false starts and the delay of game that kill you. 3 offsides on defense. Listen to when these 3 offsides happened. 1 on 3rd down, 1 that negated a sack, and 1 that negated a goal-to-go stop. That is 3 poorly timed offside penalties. I am not sure. The goal-to-go stop, they saddled Cam Hart with that. I never saw the replay. Was Cam Hart offsides?
They said he lined up. Yeah, they said he lined up. The TV broadcast showed that he lined up in the space of the wide receiver. So lined up, leaning over the line. I think, Tim, I need to double check this, but I believe 9 or 10 of Notre Dame's penalties were of the basic pre-snap variety. They were not flagged for being sloppy for the most part for in-game situations, and certainly the Toby Merriweather penalty was very, very ticky-tack because both players had their arms on. That should have just been an incomplete pass at most. I don't think that should have been a penalty. But again, that was one of the few that was actually a live action penalty against Notre Dame. And again, that's why it's so frustrating, because these are pre-snap penalties that are just mental breakdowns.
Yeah, and Marcus Freeman did mention he actually credited the Duke crowd, which is, of course, can't be an excuse because you always play loud crowds in your Notre Dame. It was a great crowd, but it was a 40,000 person great crowd. He credited their crowd. We actually spoke with Mike Golick Jr. at halftime. He wondered if there was some type of clapping or bark signal going on Duke's defensive line, but Freeman did not mention that. But he was wondering why Zeke Corral would jump offsides twice in that situation, why others would keep jumping offsides. Yeah. It sounds like it was just Notre Dame lost their composure a little bit. Obviously, something they're going to have to clean up going in. But it's when you think the team probably lost its composure for 50 minutes collectively during this game.
Maybe, yeah.
Not have had. It wasn't a seamless last drive, but that's what it was. That's the definition of one play, one life, was that last drive. They get out of the shadow of their own end because Rico Flores draws a pass interference. But as you mentioned, Tobias Merriweather goes 15 yards back on the ticky-tack call. You're saddled with 4th and 16. I asked this of Sam Hartman. He wasn't sure because I was kind of frantically trying to watch the last few plays from up top. It looked to me like he pump faked at least once, if not twice, when he crossed the line of scrimmage to try to help freeze the defense chasing him. And that is just, well, I guess it wasn't genius if he didn't know he did it, but maybe it's unconscious competence, as the old coach used to say. That was, in fact, the person next to me, I'm not going to call him out because he had a couple funny lines, including Mitchell Mayer was one of the better lines when Mitchell Evans made the catch. He's like, "Oh, you can't run for this." And I was like, "No way he can get it." And there it was. Sam Hartman, he probably knew that there was some toughness talk after last week.
Yeah, and I don't think he pump faked twice. He did right at the line of scrimmage, though, Tim. He technically wasn't even past the line of scrimmage on the pump fake that froze the pursuing defensive lineman just enough, and Sam was already in motion at that point and flashed, some athleticism that, frankly, we've heard about. We heard the coaches talk about that in the preseason, that he was a better athlete than a lot of times given credit for. Obviously, he played more than just football in his high school days. And then we're 15 minutes in, and we're guilty of just now getting around to talk about the mayor, none other than the one-handed mayor at that, and Mitchell Evans. And I'm calling him the mayor of South Bend. I'm not calling him Michael Mayer. I'm calling him the mayor of South Bend for the performance that he had tonight, his second straight breakout performance, and never needed more considering how depleted they were and the fact that Holden Stays didn't get a reception tonight.
Yeah, 6 for 134 for Mitchell Evans on 8 targets. I have him down for a quick flip. Sorry about that. 3 third down conversions among his 4 first down gains as well. If you look at the rest of the receivers, as I mentioned, he only got 56 yards from the 3 outside targets. remarkably, you only got 32 from the running backs.
Yeah.
On 8 targets. That's 4 yards per target. It was the Mitchell Evans show catching the ball today.
I think, and you should always double check my math. Math is why I'm a writer. But I believe that Sam Hartman had 15 completions, as you already noticed, 6 of those to Mitchell Evans. I think the other 9 only covered 88 total yards, right around 88 total yards to everyone not named Mitchell Evans. I thought we would maybe see a bit more Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love in this game because we did see Audric Estime struggling a little bit, and I thought that just the way that he was running it up in there, that a change of pace might have benefited Notre Dame at times in this contest. Again, obviously the Irish get it done and found a way to get it done, and Estime was once again the bell cow. Now, I'm going to say I've loved seeing Audric Estime score that touchdown. I know Marcus Freeman said, hey, we probably want to kick a field. I don't ever believe in that. And I don't know any coach, if you put him on a polygraph, that will flat out say, I want to rest everything I've got on my kicker to win a game. I don't care how close, how routine it is. And Spencer Schrader's a heck of a kicker. But I don't know a single coach that wants to go to sleep at night going, I'm ready to risk everything on my kicker.
Spencer Schrader had already missed a kick tonight. Now he was 2 for 3, but he had missed a kick. That's in his head. He missed a kick against Ohio State. That's in his head. Even though he kicks mostly long field goals, his percentage is somewhere in his head. I was completely against that notion. Now, that is what you do in the NFL when you have Robbie Gould and you go out and kick the game-winning field goals in those situations because you don't want Aaron Rodgers or Josh Allen to beat you. But against a college team, Audric Estime better score every time.
And Tim, like we heard it all week and we heard it again today. Marcus Freeman said they chose hard, but they chose to learn this week. Okay, well, then you needed to keep in this case, the home team out of the end zone with the game on the line and a chance to win it. Show us that you chose hard and learned from choosing hard. Notre Dame obviously did that. They forced the turnover on the final possession, but I thought it was critical that Estime went ahead and punched that in. I just think it sent a message. It was so much more deflating, in my opinion, at that point.
Yeah, and switching back to the defense, we actually had a little bit of an issue in the press box. You never know who's gassed and who's tired, of course, and you do have to rotate. They mentioned we have to rotate more than we did against Ohio State. And even though there weren't that many more plays in this game, I think they defended 69 plays. You could feel them wearing down a little bit, but we were wondering why they did take out JJB on one of the touchdown drives. Cam Hart did come out for one of the touchdown drives. We started seeing Tui Halamaka in there before Botello was kicked out on some key drives. And, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because you worry about guys wearing down. But, boy, it seemed like ill-timed substitutions this time where it was they're going in for this drive, and that's what's going to happen. Because watching Cam Hart sit out a whole drive where Mickey – and it's not completely Mickey's fault – fresh off the bench gives up a third down. That happens fresh off the bench because you have 2 competitive wide receivers at Duke out here. Getting thrown into that mix is tough, and I felt like they kind of put their defenders in bad positions at times, or at least on that one important touchdown drive.
And, we talk about an offensive line or other guys being in flow and in the rhythm of the game. Yeah. Cam Hart would have been in the rhythm of the game, and Jaden Mickey would not at that point. So I get the need, and especially in the first few games of the season when Notre Dame was such in command and could substitute liberally over the course of the game, I thought that was really, really smart. But they tightened their ranks last week against Ohio State. It overall worked very effectively for Notre Dame. And they had tighter rotations tonight, somewhat by necessity, somewhat by design. But, yeah, it's fair to wonder about those rotations just in those situations. But, again, maybe those were pre-planned, and Notre Dame, by both of our analysis, Tim, should already have been up 17-0 at that point, or 17-3. So maybe you make those because you feel like you've controlled and commanded this game, regardless of what the scoreboard says.
One more defender to discuss because I think his contributions are going to get lost in this. I know Xavier Watts missed a tackle that I think resulted in about 11 extra yards in the third quarter, but his interception should have set up a Notre Dame touchdown. That was about to be the statement when it was 10-0 and Xavier Watts picks it off. You start to feel, okay, well, they can put Duke away now, but credit Duke's sudden change defense right there. I also had Xavier Watts defending a wheel route, Xavier Watts breaking up a pass, and Xavier Watts defending a third down. So there's 4 really nice plays by Xavier Watts in a game that you didn't think Notre Dame's secondary shined. I wouldn't say. Benjamin Morrison, I think, got lost in the wash a little bit on that 4th down conversion. That was a well-designed play, actually. You thought Notre Dame was going to come out and stop right under the outside. It was a run-pass option, but that was pass. That's what they were looking for. Mickey, we mentioned, Cam Hart made a couple of plays, but I really thought the Irish secondary would play competitively 2-on-2 on the outside better than they did today. I give credit a lot to Duke's receivers. I thought that tandem played very well.
Yeah, and to your point, on the coverage that X had, especially on that wheel route, Riley Leonard threw a relatively good ball, but it had to be a perfect ball. It had to be an NFL ball. And I talked to an ACC coach on Friday night who told me, look, I think Riley Leonard is really good. He's top 2 quarterback in our league. This is what this coach told me. He's a definite NFL player, and Duke will not beat itself. And for the most part, Duke did not beat itself tonight, but it ended any chance of winning the game with its second turnover of the evening. And that more or less negated the fact that Notre Dame did a lot to beat itself with 12 penalties and so much inconsistency.
It was the 9th fumble caused by Notre Dame and the first recovered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 8th today was in the red zone, and that was going to be a huge play for the Irish too. Both caused by Howard Cross. Actually, I should give credit a little bit more to Notre Dame's corners because Morin Calhoun, 7 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown. That's better than I thought they would get. Long's at 27 and 21, but that was on 17 targets. So Notre Dame's corners, I think, over the course of the game played a little better than I'm giving them credit for. I just thought that after last week's effort, that would be a major difference outside, and I thought Duke started getting the best of them as the game wore on. But look, there's plenty of heroes in this game, and you can't get past the effort of Sam Hartman on that drive because I, for one, at no point thought when they were back at the 5-yard line with 2:41 to go that Notre Dame and those wide receivers were driving down the field to score. Now, it was crucial that Flores made 2 plays on that drive. Huge to see him bounce back because he also dropped a ball that led to Notre Dame not getting a chance for a touchdown there after the Xavier Watts interception. So good to see him bounce back. They really need him going forward.
Yeah, and again, Sam Hartman's composure and experience every bit as much as his physical ability on that drive, not only to draw the penalty by floating it out there to Rico, but avoiding the potential for a sack safety in the end zone that would have almost certainly irrevocably ended the game for Notre Dame. One thing I want to mention, Tim, that we talked about very early on, and because of the way the game unfolded and the fact that Notre Dame didn't hit some knockout punches early, probably won't get talked about as much. I think Marcus Freeman's decision for the fake punt on the first possession of the game, I'd put it as one of the top 5 decisions he's made thus far as Notre Dame's head coach. I think it's that valuable. I think it was that important, and it was for in that moment, and you thought it might jolt them awake for the entirety of the game, but in that moment, that was 100%, I've got the pulse of my team. This is going to jolt them awake, and we know we're going to execute.
Well, it was the second longest game of the day. Mitchell Evans had the 36-yarder, but that was massive because – yeah, you think about it, it seemed like such a crisp drive, but really they were punting. And they needed to pull that out. It was great field position for it. I have to give credit actually to our colleague Matt Freeman, was sitting 2 down to my left. He said, this is a good time to fake a punt. Immediately faked a punt. I asked him, he said it wasn't inside information. He just wants to start coaching. So Matt's going to get into coaching apparently. But that was a huge call by Marcus Freeman. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. It is one of the top 5 because without that, they probably don't win this game. I know everything changes, but boy, that offense was not going to get on track. And I want to mention our other colleague, Pete Sampson, said about Ohio State. There's a 5th quarter. Notre Dame wins the Ohio State game. I don't know who wins this one if there's a 5th quarter, but I don't think Notre Dame was all of a sudden going to start running the ball on Duke because that defense came to play. Yeah,
that's a great point. Whether it would be a 5th quarter or 2 extra minutes last week, or whatever, or if you rematch those 2 teams somehow down the road in the playoffs, if they both handle a lot of business, and that's a lot to say. I told a member of the Notre Dame coaching staff this week, I would like you guys 7 times out of 10 against Ohio State. But again, we have to focus on what Notre Dame did to find a way to win tonight, despite playing a really sloppy game in a lot of ways, especially offensively. Yes, they were very limited. I did think the receivers had moments where they blocked well. And again, much as we've seen Jaden Greathouse emerging through the first 5 games of the season and playing beyond his years, now last week in the second half against Ohio State and all of tonight against Duke, Rico Flores emerging and playing well beyond his years. You're disappointed that Notre Dame was so depleted at the wide receiver ranks. You look at those guys and think about them both being healthy and both continuing to grow. There's a lot to like about the young in Notre Dame's wide receiver core.
Yeah, and I am curious to see when Greathouse can come back. And Jaden Thomas, Marcus Freeman said he thinks they can play next week. Greathouse was going to warm up, maybe give them something in the red zone. He didn't look capable to me of playing this week or of this week at all. Hamstrings can linger. They are going to need more out of these receivers. And this is not a shot at Flores. It's just kind of kudos to Jaden Thomas. He's an underrated player because if you saw Flores get knocked back in the hole when he was coming to block for Jeremiah Love, that's the Jaden Thomas play. Yeah. Jaden Thomas comes and leads you through the hole. The timing goes off. Everything was off. People wonder, well, he runs routes. He's fast. Why can't he just play? That's why. There's a lot more going on. I found it interesting that Marcus Freeman mentioned Braylon James by name today. I did not think he was going to play. None of us thought he was going to play, but maybe he was a little closer than we thought. Maybe it's a message that, hey, if we don't get these guys back, I'm going to need a fourth receiver next week too.
Yeah, and I think, look, in talking to a number of people around the program and inside the Goog there, that if Braylon James had an August like he has had a September, he would have played today. And so it has clicked for him. He's made tremendous progress. He's gotten much, much closer when, as they broke camp, he frankly was not that close. He was very much buried down on the bottom third, whatever that is, of Notre Dame's wide receiver depth chart. But now there's obviously no Salerno. There's no Colsey for the foreseeable future. And there's tender hamstrings for Greathouse and Thomas.
Spinning it forward a little bit with Louisville, Notre Dame's going to need more from the perimeter, I think, in that matchup. Now, Louisville does not stress you quite the same way offensively, apparently. Didn't see that coming into the season. There was going to be that much of a struggle for the Cardinals offensively, but it's yet another situation where Notre Dame is going to go into a hostile environment at night. Much better chance. But now you'll be able to rebound much better because you're not rebounding from a loss here. These are all teaching points. This was a rough week of practice, I'm sure. This should be a week of practice that is very beneficial for the staff.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's the best of both worlds. You found a way to gut it out and win, really a program win, a character win, whatever you want to call it. But my goodness, there's 4 quarters of teach tape, and that's really what you want. And as we just barely peek ahead at Louisville, the Cardinals offense at times has flashed really strongly. I do believe that Louisville is doing some things offensively to protect its defense, because whatever the struggle has been for the Louisville offense, I promise you it's been a lot more for the Louisville defense.
And this will be undefeated team number 3 in a row of 4. USC will be number 4 as we with that offense. Defense might not be there, but that offense is going to get USC to undefeated when the Irish play them. So Louisville, is there something – you mentioned they're flashing offensively. What is it that you think that – I know NC State has a really good defensive line, and that turned into a rock fight as well, but it seems like Notre Dame's defensive line can turn that, if they have to, into a rock fight, and they may have to because of the perimeter problems.
Yeah, I don't think Louisville is great on the offensive line. They're okay, but they just got a little bit more speed and flash than what we saw out of Duke. Now, Duke has the better quarterback, obviously, and Riley Leonard. But again, Louisville does have some skill, some speed, and some quickness there that could be problematic. But in the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the line, that's an area where I fully anticipate Notre Dame being capable of not just winning the trenches, but commanding the trenches, Tim.
One surprise for me was that we did not see more of the stable, as you've coined them, from the running backs. We've lamented not getting it out to Love and Jadarian Price. I wonder if going forward, I don't think they've lost faith in it because they get them in early, but it seems like they have whittled it down a little bit too much considering what else they did not have today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're stung a little bit by the screen pass that didn't work last week to Jadarian Price, but it didn't work by inches, or where everyone is talking about what a great play it was. And again, Jadarian Price is really, really good. Jeremiah Love is really, really good. Both of those guys have their best football ahead of them, but both of those guys are very much capable of helping Notre Dame win football games right now. So, yeah, maybe they felt like they couldn't lean on them as much in this game because everything shrunk down, because everything was a bit more constrained. But those guys are really good football players that have earned their touches in key moments all the way through the Ohio State game. And I'm a little surprised they didn't have more touches tonight.
And before we move on, this was certainly the most trying day for Jared Parker's offense. If you look at the drive charts, they of course had the 2 great touchdown drives. The field goal drive was 4 plays minus 4 yards, so that's an unproductive drive because it came after an interception. They did have a good field goal drive, where it was 10 plays, 43 yards, but everything else is 5 snaps, 5 snaps, 5 snaps, 3 for -4, 3 for -2, 3 for 5. I expected Duke to play good defense. I felt like Duke was ahead of Notre Dame, though, today in terms on the play sheet and execution.
Yeah, and again, I would agree with you. For whatever reason, there just wasn't much for Notre Dame in the throw game. And I know, again, we've addressed that they were super limited and super thinned out on the perimeter. But I still thought, I know you and I talked today before the kickoff, we thought Holden Stays would have an opportunity to make some things happen. I thought Holden Stays would be one of those guys that would emerge maybe in the seam almost as a complementary piece to what Mitchell Evans did last week and did so early in this game. But again, it is still 6 games in or whatever for Sam Hartman and Jared Parker working together. There's been injuries almost every single week to the wide receiver core that has kept it from being intact from one week to the next. There's been obviously the international travel and the fact that they're one of the only teams in the country to have played 6 games right now. And they've played some really quality opponents. They've played some road games, and there's a lot of wear and tear right there.
Yeah, it's we always make a joke in the media. People say, does the bye week come at a good time? Well, I tell you what, the bye week needs to be coming right now for Notre Dame.
It really does. It really does.
If the bye week was coming. So they're going to have to focus going to Louisville. And then, of course, if you beat Louisville, I think you can get up for that next one pretty easily for your Irish fans. But the bye week is not well-timed this time. This has been well-timed for us, though. We have a 55-minute gap in touchdowns for the Irish, but both of them were thrilling. Notre Dame 21, Duke 14. This is all for Irish Illustrated Overtime for John Brice of FootballScoop.com. I'm Tim O'Malley. Thanks for joining us.